Great.
All right, so a couple agenda items. Zoom likes to slow down whenever I load this, but let's see. Oh, you've already made that.
Sorry, I just added that. Oh, stop.
No problem.
Mm.
Those are mine. I think if there's probably other stuff that I've been coding a while ago that I should revisit, but that's for me. Any topics anyone wants to add?
Oh gosh. Realizing I didn't mentally prepare. Did we want to do the issue about the 723? I think that's the
Oh, there's no
menu issue.
menu. Okay.
It's the one down below.
I'll copy it up here. Sure. Yep, that sounds good.
I'm having so much internet. Oh shoot, I may get disconnected.
Do you think reconnecting would help, Michelle? Do you want to just try that proactively, or no? We something you were seeing earlier, it won't change. Can't tell if Michelle's still there.
Yeah.
All right.
May have been about her last. I don't think I have anything else really.
Okay. We had some other bigger brainstorming things that we had raised earlier. And I'm trying to think, I guess this e-filing coupling to assembly line was one that we could try to discuss.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'll just put it on here. They'll at least bump it up, even if we don't end up getting to it today. Any other ones like that? There was some of the brainstorming. Okay, we have the multi-select stuff. That was one thing we were brainstorming on, never resolved.
Yeah.
And the other one is just Weaver / DocAssemble developer experience improvement stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's really right for us to talk about today.
It's a bit big. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, maybe I'll just bump it up anyway. So we don't forget that it's something we want to talk about at some point.
I guess, do you have other summer things that you wanted to get done before classes and start? And you are sort of get back to being more of 75% less and less of doing this stuff?
I think I'm already kind of there, because it's like,
You're
oh,
right there. Okay.
I gotta work on my syllabus, send out first class assignments. I'm kind of already feeling like I should have done that by now, but I didn't. So
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. But there are other things I can write down. So like, I
Yeah.
think the big things are like,
Am I still there?
You are back
We
now.
can hear you,
Welcome back.
Okay, good. Everyone
Yeah,
went
the last-
silent and I went, oh no.
Yeah, no, the last thing you said
Mhm,
was,
and
I
then-
think I might get kicked off, and we were like, maybe
And
you
then
could
I
try doing
did.
productively things, and you pretty immediately got kicked off.
Yeah. I heard you. I was hearing you. I was saying
Mhm.
things, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's that. And basically, this is just like a random assortment of things that I can think of right now. I should look at the issue list instead, but
Yes.
we have a better idea. Think about it, but for now it's okay. And then the other one is I just mentioned our call menu items. That is crazy because we were gone last week. So like it's
Well,
just
we have the menu items issue.
not that kind of menu items. Oh, I really should have called it navigation.
What?
Left navigation. Maybe there's even a better.
Oh,
better
left navigation. Okay, got it. There's always
this is
one
all
new word.
specific to like things that we could, things I was thinking of, like these are features that we should get into the Weaver to make it a lot more capable that may or may not be large tasks. They are not too large,
Yes,
Hmm.
yeah.
but more it's like how to scope them and how, like what the interface should look like is probably the biggest challenge, rather than it's like probably a small amount of code. Just think about like a way that users could interact with that feature that makes sense and it's doable.
Yeah.
All right. And Michelle, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm good, I think.
Okay.
Just have some
No, yes,
frustrations going on with DOM manipulation and kind of impossible choices. That's all.
okay. All right, well, let's start with, this is one I was just kind of working on this morning. Someone opened up an issue about this over the weekend. And then Bryce, I saw you had actually opened a related issue back in June, which I had missed. I'm sorry about that.
No, sorry, yeah, it was the production thing.
Yep.
That's my kind of bad habit of like, I sometimes will go through, and if it's just I don't have enough time, I just like silently open the issue and leave it.
Yeah.
So that's,
Well, I'm glad you're
That's
looking
what
at it,
issues
at
are
least.
for. It's better to open an issue than not to do.
Yeah, it took a month and a half for someone to report the issue, a user. So I'm glad you were proactively looking at it. We didn't act on it. That's all right. That, if you hadn't been doing it, I wouldn't have caught it earlier. So it's all right. So anyway, I think I've narrowed it down to a bug in DocAssemble that's not described in the changelog, as far as I can tell.
Okay. Wow.
So it's fixed in the latest version. I could reproduce it on the current version. Trying to decide if there are other steps to take on the production server besides doing an upgrade. And I've been writing out my security notes, and I really do feel like the right recommendation to give people as far as updates is to not be more than a month behind DocAssemble latest, because we're not really following that policy though on our production server.
yes, yeah.
I can walk you through my process a bit more if it's helpful. I just trace the error to a specific session, which I've already, well, I guess I still have it open, but I don't want to navigate.
This isn't.
This is
Obviously,
not
this
disclosing any user data right
Okay,
now.
good,
And
yeah.
I had it open in a way that wasn't, I had an open list of the variables that I was looking at to, would not disclose any user data, but
Cool, okay. Just
yeah, but I don't have it open anymore, so I'm not going to try to do that. But like the basic problem is you get to the screen, you check off which children are part of an individual case.
Mhm.
And instead of making them objects, it was
Mhm.
making them true or false value, which is like what a traditional checkbox in DocAssemble does, right?
Mm.
But object checkboxes are supposed to make a list with a subset of the items that are on the checklist as
Yeah.
objects, not as true false values. So I've never seen this. I never have noticed this particular issue when I was developing. It does seem to be present on our production server. Our production server is fairly out of date.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I updated it probably a few months ago at this point. Like whenever because I guess it's whenever 447 was the most up to date because we don't choose ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time I do update things, it takes an hour about to actually do a full refresh. And so I get nervous enough. That's like long enough time that it's like, okay, I don't like having an hour downtime. And I just get nervous enough. And I don't like doing it on Friday, which is when I sometimes remember it on like Thursday and Friday. And so all I have to
When you
say
say
it's
it takes an hour, what do you mean? Do you mean that
It-
you're doing
it-
update in the here?
no, it doc
Upgrade?
assemble updating that one. Oh, okay. But yeah,
But I think
guess
this is not it. This does
it's
not need
not
to
a
be
system
container
one?
upgrade. No,
Oh,
I don't
okay,
think
yeah.
so.
I don't know
Let
why I
me
was
look.
blinking it. Yeah, the container
What is
upgrades
this
take an
thing?
hour. Is
Yeah.
what I was
Oh,
meant to say,
hmm.
but
This is a very specific issue, which we don't have to worry about. This is about
yes,
creating
yeah.
a default API key. We're safe. Their last update that really.
That was why.
So
I
anyway,
because
that
we
was in
didn't hand
April.
off.
We've
Mhm.
upgraded since then.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's not always a very clear keyword because I know there've been other. Probably we should ask Jonathan to be more specific about the keywords he uses for that.
Yeah. Honestly, wouldn't hurt. I can. It might help to like go through, do a fix or do a like actual search and change the change log to
Oh.
make it a separate header of just like system upgrade. But
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Okay, well, so I think all we'd have to do is click the upgrade button. We've been running it on our dev server for some period of time, at least. That's when I logged. I think that
6.7
was released this
specifically?
week because I can see we already are running it. I didn't personally update it, but
we're on 6.6.
we're running it. There's no upgrade button here. Oh, it does say
What?
6.6. That's weird.
Yeah, how did the upgrade button disappear?
Well, this is dev.
Here, I'm going to pause it and look at the config to see if it's different there.
Okay. I can see it on my when I've logged it.
You know what?
So I don't
It's because I'm logged in with the wrong account.
Oh.
I'm just logged in as a developer rather than an admin. I just chose
That's
that
cool.
drop down then. That's funny. Not descriptive enough in my password list. Okay, so we're not actually running the latest.
They're one behind.
What were the changes between those two? New version of WebDriver. That might break Kill in the Playground, I suppose.
Which we aren't running on the production.
We're not using this .delete method of DA Global anywhere, to my knowledge.
Yeah, why would WebDriver Manager? I don't think it should.
Well, it's tied to Selenium, so I wasn't sure. I don't know if it's used. That's the only thing I can think
I
of.
think
that would be
Node is
affected.
installing its own Chrome driver whenever it's installing stuff, but I could be wrong. So maybe.
Okay.
But like, that's not the end of the world. We still have like.
Yeah, we're not using it on production, as Bryce pointed out.
I don't know if we're using globals anyway. I vaguely have maybe I've put them in some of the FP stuff,
You might.
EFSP, but we aren't running any of that on production either.
No.
We could also look at the change log and see if there's any, not the change log, the actual commits. Compare it to the previous version and see if there's anything that he hasn't mentioned.
We certainly could. We could certainly do that. Let me see. When is it? When did it come out?
Recently, I think. I don't remember seeing this one last week.
There's no date on it. Okay, so it came out on Friday.
Okay.
So it's pretty recent. Wait, July 8th, so a week ago Friday. Actually, it's a
Oh,
week.
interesting.
That's
That's
fine.
cool.
Okay, we don't seem to be using DA Global. It's a pretty new feature. I think we're using things that were compatible with it.
Mhm.
The profile stuff. is
GitHub
something we would
search
use more.
isn't the best, by the way. Just-
It'll find it. It
Yeah,
would find it in our
it's
projects. I think.
Just a
so.
keyword, and it's a full word. But I think it would work here.
Okay, I've had really weird
Search
experiences
isn't
with-
great. Yeah, search isn't great at like dots and or like syntaxy stuff. Although it's gotten a lot better. I think it looks like you're on like the newer one. I don't remember if it's beta still, but you're on the newer one, Quentin, and that one's a bit better and at least more comprehensive. I haven't run into things where it just won't find the right information for me as much.
Okay,
And for what it's worth, I'm looking at my checked out selection of things, and yeah, I'm only finding that same one instance of DA Global and reserved keywords.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to
In
search
our
across all of our repos, which yeah, but that's good to know as well. Yeah, because I'm remembering this is a DA Global's pretty new feature. We're using, it's not that new. Looking at this, it says I opened this in March 2022. So it's been more than a year and a half, I guess. But there are other features that did the same thing, just not quite as well before.
What does DA Global do? Never mind, we can
Yeah.
move on, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can find out later.
So I'm tempted just to do this upgrade. Any other thoughts? Production error on our 209A.
No, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Well, just
It's
might not
worth it.
fix it, that's all, but
Well, what I did to confirm is I tested it on our current server and on the production server and up the playground with a very, very minimal reproduction.
okay.
So it's definitely a bug with the object checkboxes feature, which is not
Yeah.
limited to this interview. It's not, so one is using the assembly line code, one's using MA virtual core code. So it's not even limited to like our packages,
Okay,
yeah.
but it's just not documented anywhere, but it does seem to be a bug. All right, so I'm going to try this and then,
Yeah, doing it now, I guess is fine, and I'll just try and remember to keep an eye out for all of the
new and different production.
yeah,
issues.
any new production errors that are popping up.
Yeah, actually,
It's
that's
is it the what's the sorry? Could you go back and open the issue on the made issue that you had for it? Just I wanted to make sure that it is the
7.
yeah, it's the bullet letter one. Okay. I was just
It'd be
gonna
good to
archive all of those
check the
production
list
errors.
of. It'd be good to check the list of interviews just to make sure they're all still running.
Yeah.
After updating.
I guess I
Good
don't have to
call.
close this yet, but all right, that's that issue. I guess we could wait for it to upgrade, but I don't think we have to literally watch it run.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's fair. We can start with everything.
All right, so I started working on this blog post about security. This was in my consulting hat, doing some notes, which are obviously relevant to the stuff that we're doing as well. And I was trying to just like not reinvent the wheel, right? Like, happy to share the draft with folks. But it's already 7 pages.
Okay.
Maybe more, 7. All right. So basically, all right, these are my bullet points. All right, understand what you actually need to protect against, because you can't have perfect security. So know what you're trying to mitigate and why. Backup and continuity. Using encryption and strong passwords where they're appropriate. Updating the host operating system. Updating the web application. And then I haven't really, those I've gotten pretty complete notes on now. And turning off services you don't need and using separation principle of least privilege. I guess I actually shouldn't
Yeah.
say it's just the web application. I suppose there's also S3, AWS, etc. Oh,
So your
GitHub.
database storage.
Database storage.
I'm just trying to generalize as opposed to saying S3.
You mean objects? Okay, object storage.
Yeah, I'm just trying to generalize for all of them. But these people using Azure instead of AWS and stuff like that.
True. Yeah, and you certainly don't have to use GitHub just because you're using Dockassemble, although it's certainly a lot easier if you do.
Strongly recommended.
So I'm not sure if it makes sense to go through it. It probably doesn't, but I'll share it with folks.
Yeah, I'd be happy to read it. It's a thing. I think 7, the like least privileges part is the will be the tricky part, because Dockassemble is one of those.
Yeah,
someone
once
who
you're
has the
developing.
yeah, like if you give them any amount of privileges, they could easily escalate, really. And so
Or they really have full control, right? Like there's not really even a.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not actually escalation, it's just by design.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing is it's not like users can run arbitrary code, but
Yeah.
anyone other than a user, a developer is.
Yeah.
Admin.
Not quite, I was gonna say not quite the right avenue, though it's close. I don't know. There had been like a few bugs that I had found that were like, oh, people can upload docs, like docx's that do whatever, because like it'll evaluate things that are in there. It'll like evaluate whatever changes in their docx, and they can get whatever they want from that. And so but that's not quite like practical security considerations. Here's how you do things. That's just these are sort of open problems with Dockassemble and having a lot of code running in a lot of different places. But
Right.
Also is the problem with shared interviews, that there's just more ways to access.
I think, yeah, I think you make that's a note in what you have of like encrypting people's answers and stuff, which is
Yeah.
like, yeah, we should, but in practice we don't, because it makes several other things that are useful and sometimes necessary to do hard. So
Yep.
So I'm
Yeah.
just saying that might be, I maybe already mentioned it. Obviously I haven't read. But
Yeah, I do, but
that
yeah,
consideration when you're considering what
right.
capabilities you give the user.
And I think it comes down to like security for what, which I don't know if that's the best phrasing of it, but that's basically how I summarize it. Right? Like, well, what are you storing? Why does it need to be secure? And what trade-offs are you willing to make to get there?
And whose responsibility is the security? Like, are you counting on the user to be careful with their information? Like to not share the link and to clear public computers, of the information. And that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Am I?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, sorry, just distracted because I'm typing at the same time. You can't see what I'm typing. I'm just trying to share the link with you.
yeah.
Sure.
I think what you're talking about makes sense, Michelle. It's one of those. I too will have to take a look and see like sort of what you're focusing on, because it's one of those, security can be anything, and that could be a really big post. And so if it's like if it's mostly targeted at like admins, like or admins and people who are actually like running Dockassemble, then it's worth like a sentence to say like, this doesn't cover everything, like you're just not going to be able to, but
Yeah.
I don't think in that case, if we're still targeting admins, I don't think it's quite worth to go into here's all the way that like users could still steal their info if they're not being careful. And there's a separate blog post that would be also very interesting. That is like from the product side of things, how do you make a product that is as secure as possible? Like, it's mostly like those are, to me, seem like two different questions. So
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, it could be separate. It could, I mean, I do like kind of just, this is my nod at it, right? Like, which is once users can share interviews, you're losing the benefit of encryption at rest, which I think has questionable value for most real world use cases, right? Like most data we have, we
Encryption
want to
at
do
rest.
acts, we want to do things with the data. So if we encrypt it, we can't do those things. You can't do any kind of aggregate analysis of encrypted data. You can't reuse it easily, right? So you can't recover it from a user who loses their password. I see people posting about that all the time on DocAssemble Slack.
Mhm.
So there's some downsides to it. One really concrete thing I did is I just was playing around with this morning. I was like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So like, I want to make sure my evaluation of DocAssemble's security is useful. I should probably see what other people do to evaluate open source product security.
Yeah.
And I did find this. I didn't find very good blog posts or any reputable sources that are just focused squarely on, hey, here's why open source is or is not secure. It's like a bunch of like low reputation sources, honestly, for the most part. Like none that was like, hey, here's a good authoritative overview of this that I want to cite.
Yeah.
So that would be nice if that was out there. But I did find this scorecard, which seemed useful, and I ran it on DocAssemble. And, there's some things that DocAssemble does well according to the scorecard. There's some things it doesn't do at all, partly because Jonathan's kind of like the sole maintainer. There's no branch protection. There's very little code review, for example, because only really Jonathan reviews code. And he does most of the posts. He doesn't review his own code.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but the nice thing is that there's some of the things that it can detect in an automated way are there and are good. There's some things that are more policies and practices, and so vulnerabilities. There's no vulnerabilities that were actively detected.
Mhm.
Yep.
There's pretty good pin dependency usage. So there's some of these things where it's like, I wonder if this is a good reference. It's the kind of thing to include. If there's other kinds of linking out that can happen to make this both more reliable and to, reduce effort of writing this post and making it short enough you can digest it. That's my goal, is to make this be an overview you can read and in one go. It's not meant to be like a comprehensive reference you look up how to do something. It's more like, hey, I can read this, understand what I need to do to be good at securing my DocAssemble server. 7 pages feels like it's already a bit long, but
Yes. I was gonna say.
I think it's not much I could cut. I'm not going into a lot of detail for most of these. And I'm trying to figure out how to use things to like let you easily pull out the takeaways. And I think it's mostly just by using the headings as action sentences.
Okay.
But
so people can kind of navigate to wherever they think
and then
is.
use lists as well. So like here, like instead of just saying update policy, it's like I say what to do. Use automated updates. Update the DocAssemble web application at least monthly, which like thinking this through, I think is right, because like sometimes there's updates to dependencies of DocAssemble that happen, and those, there's CVEs against those, right? Like, so if you're not updating DocAssemble, you're not also updating its dependent packages, and you potentially have vulnerabilities that aren't even discussed in the changelog because there's some dependency.
Yeah. That makes sense. It looks like there's been like so it's like anytime there's like a Dependabot update, is essentially when there's a dependency downstream from DocAssemble or upstream from DocAssemble and something that it's using. And there was two of them last week, 2 of them 2 weeks ago, 4 of them 2 weeks ago, another 2 of last month, some in June, some in May, etc. It's like it seems to be every 2 or so weeks is when the actual security, like when Dependabot stuff gets merged. So that with like a little bit of lag for Jonathan to actually make a release, which he does pretty quickly, but it's still like a week, maybe. So like every 3 weeks, which rounded to a month. So just for people to remember easily is probably okay.
Yeah, I was just like thinking through like what my comfort level would be. Like, I would say you should probably do it within a week of
hard.
the release, but
Mhm.
there's good reasons to not because of all the validation you have to do as your server gets more complex.
Exactly. And it is the one thing that it's like there are still things that could be added to DocAssemble of like, oh, upgrade not to the immediate latest thing, because I know Matt has done a few times, has like tested everything on like 1.4.66, and then right as he's ready to update, it's like 1.4.67 comes out and he can't update to 66 easily, and so he has to do all this testing with 67 again. And instead of just being able to install something, upgrade to something that's like one patch version behind that with something he's already validated. So
Yeah.
So there's like, I don't know, but also just like, yeah, I think all I have to say, that's like a good suggestion. There might be different suggestions that I would have if we had slightly better tooling in a few places, but that will come at some point, probably, hopefully.
Okay, well, I've updated. Production servers finished updating. I'm gonna just try my minimal reproduction of the problem first to see if it does the right thing now. Jonathan's saying there wasn't this problem, to his knowledge, in that particular version. So
There were 2 more errors 3 minutes ago that were the same Boolean and letter issue. So
3 minutes ago.
yeah, one at
That's weird.
11:49.
Well, this is working now. I don't know why that would just happen. All right. Might be just because I had loaded that. This might be the same. All right, I'm not going to share this. I'm going to pause my share again. All right, well, I'm still getting the error. Oh, but of course,
Yep, another one.
I'd have to go back and I'd have to go back to it's the object is defined incorrectly.
You are correct. Yeah, you have to go back. I don't know. I
Not
guess
for how many
far back.
screens I'd have to go back, but
Yeah.
Just a quick peek. All right, so it's other care custody proceedings, elements, children, elements. So it's just items 0. Okay. Oh, this is a list. So I can't really add a patch that tries to make this be the right kind of object because we don't know which item they would have checked.
Are those user answers?
Yeah.
You might want to
that
not
was-
share those.
It was closed though. So, all right.
I mean, I was seeing the screen. So
Like as far as like you weren't seeing like names of anybody.
he collapsed the specific things he needed,
I
or
see.
the specific PII.
All right,
Okay.
so I'm thinking through, that was the preview screen according to that error. Let me see the interview order block, how far back you selected information about each case, I guess.
So this was maybe someone who started the interview before the update. Is that what we're saying?
Oh, it definitely was someone who started the interview before the update. That's what caused this error,
Yeah.
that it triggered us trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Before closing the issue, we might want to write in the issue that was fixed by an update. Just so, because we give issues to people to track, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at this now, but yeah, that's true. But I think I said that earlier actually too.
Okay, so
Let's see. There are really a number of questions after that, but I think we can't really have somebody submit this without the names of the children. That's really the important information in the affidavit. So I could try to patch the code in the module file so it doesn't try to trigger the letter attribute, but it's going to just be a true or false for child 0, right? Like that's still not correct. So I think the only fix is for the person to hit back several times till they get to the right question. And then they're going to have to re-enter a significant amount of information.
Yeah.
Or
could they do it in an edit screen? No.
I don't think this interview has an edit screen.
Well, the edit screen would can't change the data type in the edit screen. Right.
Well, no, not really. All right, what I can do is I can see from the user's answer, they provided an email address, so I'll just reach out to them for that particular user. Can't think of any other real fixes. We could invalidate that particular response based on like the session date, I guess.
That sounds totally reasonable. Yeah.
Well, I don't really like having a lot of code like that in
But
our,
it could just be temporary. Like, we don't have to keep it forever.
so this is to avoid someone redoing an interview that they might have given up on already, right? So it's tricky to say that that's justifiable if we're adding new code that has to be tested so it doesn't break things. And then that has that kind of like boxing around it.
Okay.
It's definitely an option, but I'm not sure it's a great option because of the fact that we're adding new on, to code that's going to be hard to test.
Yeah.
All right, let me just start by emailing the individual. Just a little bit risky. But
You can also put the information in the issue for the other person.
I don't think there's more than one person.
Oh, okay.
When you open a session, it gets attributed to everybody who opens it. So once I opened it, it showed up again, but it's the same exact screen.
Oh, I thought there were 2 people that ran into the error, Bryce said.
There was somebody in June.
I see.
There were
As in
scenarios.
reported the
No,
issue.
I said it popped up again, and that was because Quinn was refreshing it. So that was.
I
probably
see.
when-
Restarting the server probably is what made it happen. Yeah. Then the two entries are on the exact same number of screens, because that seems a little bit unlikely. That it's possible, like, hey, this is the path when there's one kid in one previous case.
Hmm.
So it's the same exact number of page views. That is possible, but it seems more likely that it's because I've linked two users to the one session, I think.
Okay.
Um, okay, so that's, I'm writing an email to the person who had the problem. I mentioned the OSS security scorecard to Jonathan.
That might be useful to use on Elkeln as well. See where we're at.
What would be?
The security scorecard.
Oh,
We have
yeah.
a slightly different security situation where a lot of the usual security stuff doesn't super apply, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, a lot of that stuff is. It's one of those like, oh, doing this wrong could mean that there's more security things. It's not super like. I wouldn't, there's not like there's probably a better word. I'm thinking it in terms of like primary source versus like a secondary source, and this feels like a very like secondary sourcey sort of thing. And it's less actually looking at any of the security of your stuff, and it's more of, well, if you have a lot of people reviewing your code, more likely to be secure, which is, it's more of a coding best practices stuff than really a security stuff from what I could tell. Definitely not a bad thing though.
mhm.
And it looked like it was fairly easy to run, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it is pretty easy to run. It took me like a second. I just had to get my GitHub access token, personal access token, and then run it. You can also run it as a GitHub action, which might not be a bad thing for us just to do. I think that helps us get this badge if this is an important scorecard to use. I just found it through a broad Google search, but I have heard of the foundation at least. At least I feel like I have. Maybe they're just using a name that's generic enough that it's.
Sounds familiar.
I think
Yeah.
I heard this is-
They seem to have a lot of stars on GitHub, which is, I guess, some indication of.
Yeah, they're definitely not. Like, no one.
Oh, it's part of the Linux Foundation. So yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. Someone want to take the next issue while I just finish sending this email? So I see we have custom menu item. I just like, yeah, let me know like a high level. I did see the issue notes when I was gone.
The high level of that was there were several weird behaviors that were like, I don't understand why DocSimple seems to be like skipping initial blocks that it should be running. And various other things that were like, we tried and we're like, this should work, and then it just didn't work for some reason. But the thing we landed on was if we move and reconsider from defining like the temp block to specifically defining AL menu items, and we document that like you need to delete AL menu items temp every time you do it, like if you want to override some stuff in your interviews, then that like works fine. And it's mostly a matter of if we think that's a good enough solution, we make one quick change on our side, and then we document it such that, okay, if you want to do something similar, make sure you call delete AL menu items or whatever. So,
So I think there's a way also to do it without deleting. Without forcing them to delete menu items, just depending on the way we use the variable that they're creating. We're deleting the list is what we're deleting, which is a little bit different. But I think this is like the templates where we allow the user to override the variables we're creating with their own variables. That's what we would do. And if we did that, if we defined variables in separate blocks so that they could be overridden, that would allow a developer to write their own code to set the values of those items.
They do still need to use the reconsider. But
Well, that depends, I think, on what we do with our code, because we could use in our own block that you can't see here, we could use AL menu items, and then like I think we could set it up so depending on the way that we set it up, we might be able to delete, and they just have to define a couple variables themselves.
if we delete it in the reconsider block, essentially, so it's always fresh and every screen load.
We could have the reconsider block is what I'm saying. I'm saying I think we can handle the reconsider block as long as we allow the developer to define it in certain ways, and we, trigger that variable collection in certain ways. I think it would be easier to see if we were looking at code. So apparently I'm not very good at explaining this. I also had trouble explaining this to Bryce. So
Yeah, I'm just trying to see. There's not a patch here. It says it is, but let's see.
well, sorry, the patch is the
Also-
the div
Yeah.
section right below it.
also, I think we should
Right.
change a variable name there to make it more clear. I think there needs to be a different variable name.
Yeah.
But
A
that's
little
separate.
reluctant to change variable names. I feel like when we do
But
that,
it's just internal.
usually
It's
backwards
just
compatible way.
it's internal.
It's not, well, it's
and-
not, nothing's internal on
Yeah.
Doc as a whole. Like, nothing is internal because you have like, all of these are
Yeah.
already running, and so like, there will already be menu items defined in multiple other interviews, and maybe it's enough, but like, I don't quite know, because we're also moving reconsiders around and
But
stuff.
there is also the idea that there are certain things that we support and certain things that we're not supporting, right? Like.
So we have a
that's
patch for this
reasonable
that's
thing.
in a branch, or no pull request yet? We're just gonna.
No pull request. I think there might be more we can do to make.
Sorry,
this-
the only
no
thing
branch.
is that little bit of code that we haven't made a PR with it yet, but it's just, that's the code that works, and then the bit of code below it is what the users use.
I think we could handle the reconsider.
I'm still skeptical. It's less about what we all are like allowing for and like, oh, we're breaking you, and like, even because you're doing undocumented things, it's more we break our own interviews, and I'm not sure if we would. I feel like we could, and I would not be certain that we won't if we change internal names like this as at the same time as changing all these reconsider blocks and stuff.
I mean, that's not what I was talking about right there. I was talking about the reconsider blocks, but.
You were also talking about
yes.
renaming variables, right?
Well, in a separate sentence. I'm trying to break these out into separate conversations and just like highlight that both of those are conversations we might have.
That's good.
All right, yeah. Well, why don't we start with thinking through the reconsider whether we do it or if it's something we leave to the author. I mean, I guess the reason we don't just have like a declarative block somewhere that says, hey, list all your menu items here, is because it just breaks DocAssemble's customizability, right? Like the reason people use it, whenever you try to have a declarative list of stuff, you're overriding people's ability to do more sophisticated things. You're basically reinventing a config language that does less than docassemble can do.
But that's what we're doing already, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, I found a way to override this just by redefining one of these blocks. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was just a key, like having it run after the first one runs. I had to do the full definition of the
That's what
menu.
I'm saying. I'm saying we may remake the menu block with the menu items anyway. So, I mean, whatever we're breaking, we're already breaking.
But do we want to encourage people to memorize the special syntax, or do we want to just say, hey, if you need to override the menus, you can do it here? There's benefits to both. I guess the one is like, the question is,
But
how good can we make our
They
DSL
can't
for this, right?
override what we're doing right now unless we change how we're doing it to what Bryce and I are discussing, or at least we couldn't find a way.
Yeah, as I said, I actually could do it. It's just felt kind of heavy-handed.
Okay.
So yes, they can. It didn't feel like a great solution if you want to use any of the default menu items to have to redefine it totally,
Mm.
which is what I did. I basically just copied that block, put it into my own interview, and made the change I needed to make to add the extra. I just wanted to add an extra menu item, essentially.
That's weird. We tried to like redefine some of this stuff and it didn't work.
Let me see if I can find my change. I'm gonna pause my share for a second.
Sure.
This was,
I would have to look back on our video anyway to like compare what we tried, but obviously you got it working, so it works. Which is good.
yeah, I mean, like as you were saying earlier, like it felt like it should work. So I don't know if it was just like another magic things loaded in the right order in this instance, and it's not gonna reliably work or easily work.
And
the
there's,
same time.
by the way, there's also the fact that we hide the first two items somewhat unexpectedly on the first couple pages. So we don't hide just any specific items, we hide the first two items regardless of what the first two items are in the menu, the first two menu items.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're
Went
saying
into
like you're throwing a
that.
lot of like things out while I'm trying to load stuff, so it's hard for me to track them. But maybe if you write them,
Sure,
they help.
okay.
All right, let me see if I can
Right, I'm gonna
find
hear.
where I did this. I just found, I thought this had been working. And it seemed like it did work at one point because I wrote code that did a bunch of stuff with the menu items, and then it stopped working. So I don't know. This was working with a client who likes to just change code. So I don't know if he just changed code and broke it. Yeah, this I think is my thing here that worked. All right. New. Just a new scratch file here. So I just added this user profile menu item. And then I just had to copy everything about defining the rest of the menu item. And that worked just fine. I made it mandatory and I added a reconsider. I took away the initial modifier, I guess. But it happens earlier in the interview than the rest of the any other mandatory blocks. Or at least any
So
relevant.
it happens above the include.
No, not above the include, but above the interview order block. which that was sufficient for this interview. I
That's
suppose the reason we're doing the
great. I think I
reconsider,
Had a problem trying to do that. But I don't remember it clearly enough.
yeah, this did work. So it was really just putting this in the right place. And then I had to define everything. So it's like, how do we kind of like nest these different things, right? And the same thing happens with navigation items. We don't have any system that purports to manage navigation items, but if we want to add some default navigation items from the Weaver, I can see the same issue. And I actually had opened an issue for this at one point. Let's see. Basically, to have a general purpose way to do adding and removing items from the navigation. Here it is. I added this a while ago. Because I found, for example, in yeah, okay. So you have like this, I guess that this was inspired by the 209A. I actually implemented something that does this as a one-off for my Up to Code interview. And essentially, like as you go through the interview, there's menu items, navigation items that you want to remove and add as the interview progresses. And the way DocAssemble does that, you can do it, but it feels kind of clunky because you have to basically redefine the list each time. It's not tied to a it's not very dynamic. Essentially delete the list, recreate it at the time you want it to happen. It's a general purpose problem, but let me just look at this solution and see. Looking at this code here, this requires you to think through the assembly line items that are menu items. That's not something I'd want authors to have to do. How does the solution here compare?
Bryce, where is it that you created the interview that we tested this with? And you're muted.
It's on my local machine, question mark.
I see, okay.
Well,
it would
just
be
want the
nice, it
full
would be,
interview?
but
You just need the full
well,
interview? What do you, wasn't sure what you were asking.
I just think it would be easier to see it being used than just looking at the differences in the code of assembly line.
I'm not sure if it really
That's on the,
makes a big difference here, but
I just made a comment of the full interview.
okay. Great. I see in the full context of the interview, but yeah, I don't know if we have to run it to be able to see it. Okay, so you're just basically saying, okay, we're going to edit this one list. We're going to add items to it by extending it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that the thing that I wanted to,
Yeah.
the thing I was trying to do was, or at least was aiming for, was like, okay, we don't want someone to have to, like, we don't want it to by default overwrite all of the stuff that we're setting up for you if they want that.
Mhm.
If they do want to get rid of it, they can just run menu items clear or whatever. But if they don't want to and they want to still use it and they just want to add stuff to it, then they can do that. So
Okay. So they keep the AL menu items as it is. They
Mhm.
add some items to it, and then they define AL menu items to be. Yeah, this seems pretty good solution.
I think we could also do the definition of AL menu items temp in a similar way, not so people have to redefine it, but so they can redefine it if they decide they need to change the entire thing.
they can do
If
that.
they-
in
That
this
is what they're
block.
doing now. This is what I was showing. This is that
I
solution.
suppose so.
Yeah.
That's true.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
This is
It just-
redefining everything, yeah.
It's just they wouldn't have to use a different method to do it, but okay.
Well, tell me more about what you mean. What do you mean? They don't have to find a different method to do it.
Meaning they would just have to, they would be interacting with it. They wouldn't have to do this whole block. They would just define menu items, AL menu items temp. In a way, I mean, in the same way as they are having to currently, as we currently showed them redefining AL menu items, so that it's just, they don't have to have this whole different interaction. They can have a similar interaction as the one we just showed in the issue.
I'm really lost, but I think you're saying like, all right, to totally define it the way that they want with what the items they want.
To totally
it's-
redefine the block is a kind of, so in the issue, we showed how they could just define AL temp, I mean, AL menu items, right? In that second comment or in the second half of that first comment. Yeah, sure. Right. So right there, right? They define AL menu items. We could do a similar thing for AL menu items temp so that it matches this way. So all these things match and they don't have to use a whole different solution, which is the block that you just did. So that they can graduate from doing it this way to saying, oh, I actually need to change everything. And then they'd be able to do it in a similar way that they just did for this, instead of redefining the whole thing like you did in that block.
I really have no idea what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Bryce, do you have any ideas about what I'm saying?
No, I too am a little lost.
Okay, so in Quentin's method, he redefines the whole block. Maybe if I do gestures, he redefines the whole block from start to finish,
Mhm.
right? Okay, so say a person came and used our method that we described in the issue,
Mhm.
and then they said, oh, you know what? I really need to change the whole thing. I need to change AL menu items temp. I don't just want to extend it. If we built it right, they could do that in a similar way that they just did this.
I believe they can already do this.
Okay, so
If they
like,
had to redefine it, they would just
Like,
do it.
like, so the thing that is triggering the block and the way we've set it up is AL menu items. So
oh,
as
that's
you
true.
can do
Okay,
anything
so they
you want
just
to
define
menu
it
items temp.
beforehand. Sure.
Yeah, as long as it's just the few lines before, and there's item potency
Fair
issues and stuff that might pop up, but it's,
Yeah, that's the, but
Yeah.
okay.
sorry, I don't know, I literally could not follow what you were saying until the last one, sorry.
That's, yeah, I don't know what it was either, but
We're
whatever. it
running out,
was.
running out of brain juice.
Okay,
Maybe-
which I guess we should see if we have to prioritize anything else before moving on from this one. Although I guess it would be good to fix this since we had someone asking about it this morning.
Yeah,
Although it sounds like they don't really need this fix for what they're trying to do.
yeah, I think the thing we already had was the better fix, so.
Disabling the answer set
The
and
config,
using the
yeah.
buttons instead of using the, they don't really want to add more items. They just want to remove stuff. Although one person did want to add an item. And I don't think we have a way to do that yet.
Yeah.
Let me just take a look at this and see.
I
What-
also
Do
wrote
you want to
down,
describe the name change? I'm definitely skeptical, but I haven't heard what your position is yet.
just that temp is a confusing name for people to interact with. That's all.
Yeah, that was my understanding from when we talked about it on last week, was just temp was not a great name. I think, was it? Yeah.
I see.
basically-
So-
basically,
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant. I think it's the right way to name a temporary variable that only lasts for the block. But if we're having it last for
it now no longer
block,
lasts for the
then
block,
it's no
yeah.
longer temp. Right.
Did it
So
only
as
ever
of
last
now,
for
it's
the
actually,
block?
it only lasts for the block. Yeah, it's never used outside of that block. So that's not really a rename of a,
We did split it.
Well,
so I
it
guess,
was,
okay.
we did use it. We extended
you
it.
used it, but
Oh.
yeah, we don't have to. Let me just double check
Okay.
this.
Well, I mean, What I'm saying is they used it outside the block.
Who's that?
The author did.
Where?
The author you were working with, Quinn? Is that what you're
No,
talking about?
the author in our example.
Well, that's for code
Bryce's
that doesn't set,
example.
That's
that
just
code doesn't
general
work
code.
yet because it needs a patch to assembly line.
Yes, I know.
When you say
But
the
we're
author, you mean
talking about
this
changing the
demo
name.
here? This just proposed
Yes,
patch?
yep.
Okay.
This, we are talking about a name change, and that's why I'm saying that this patch here, this issue is the code in the issue is what I'm saying might make us consider a name change from temp, because temp doesn't really, because then temp does get used outside of the code,
If we adopt that,
outside of the
it will
block.
be,
Yeah,
right? But
Yeah,
right now, it's
exactly.
only lasts the length of this one block. It's not used anywhere else.
That's right. For some reason, I did forget that that it was only ever in the one block. I'm more okay with it. Realizing that I thought for some reason it lasted multiple blocks and we simply added we moved a reconsider around, but that is not the case. So I'm okay with renaming as well, honestly. I just thought I thought it was gonna add a lot more like weird doc assembly bugs to our stuff than so.
So AL menu items is what gets
And if you
defined.
want, I can talk
That's the-
about, if you want, I can talk about how I think we could handle the reconsider ourselves.
I don't really know what you mean by the reconsider ourselves, but I guess maybe vaguely I do. You're saying
The
instead of
reconsider
having the
and,
author add the reconsider modifier, we do it.
yeah, they wouldn't have to add the reconsider and they wouldn't have to add the delete, whatever. AL menu items temp, because maybe we could handle that.
I think we would have
That's
to
the
have a
thing.
reconsider though. Whatever they do, they would want to have it reconsidered each block. Or like
Okay.
each new screen. That's part of why this is tricky.
Okay,
And it's an issue with like this kind of data structure in DocAssemble, basically.
just
Then
like if we add a block, it has reconsider and it uses their variable, then I don't know why.
I think all right. So I mean, I guess where I would come in with that is thinking like,
No, maybe they have to do.
It's a bit-
reconsider, I don't know.
yeah, it's a bit more fragile, right? Like you're saying we're going to do it for you if you use these magic names.
But they have to use a magic name anyway.
Yeah, but they can not necessarily like a magic method of defining the items in there, right? So maybe it's not sure. All right, well, let's go back to the name things. I think the name is probably right. I don't think it should be base. That doesn't seem meaningful to me, but maybe if we called it default.
Okay,
Both those sound good to me. So
and I'm adding that to the,
Or even make it
That's okay.
longer. Make it default items. So there's no reason to not be verbose here, since we're adding something that's a little confusing.
Yeah.
Um,
and then the last item is
was it about whether we still want to delete items?
first two
Yeah.
items in the, I mean, what I'm saying is we can look for specific items to delete instead of just deleting the first two items. Like
So
arbitrarily.
you're saying search the name of the items to see. The problem is that if we actually want to translate this, we also have to.
But we could add a key in there that DocAssemble doesn't use, like ID or, menu item ID or AL menu item ID as an arbitrary key in the dictionary. And then
It's not
search
a
for that
dictionary
key.
though. It's a list.
Yeah, but for each, we're gonna go through each item in the list.
You're saying
What
in
we would
this,
do is we'd
it's a
loop
list
through
of
each item
dictionaries.
in
You're
the
saying add
list.
an extra
And then we
key.
would delete the first, we would delete the items we find with that specific, like, directive or whatever you want to call it. Oh my gosh, apparently
I
can't
get
do
what
it.
you're saying. I'm just
Okay.
thinking about like the spooky action at a distance thing, which
This is, I'd argue what we're doing now is, I guess, less spooky action at distance, but it's more hard coded, I would prefer.
yeah, it is definitely more hard coded.
I don't know.
I'm looking at it again though. I'm wondering if we really do need to delete items. I mean, it makes it a lot more robust if we're letting people customize it if we just stop deleting things. So you're saying add another key, which is currently not used by DocAssemble.
It
And
could be
presumably
like,
won't be incompatible with the future DocAssemble change. So like something here to like the menu item dictionary, which
it could be
right
like
now it's
hide
set
on
for
first
certain
two,
things.
it could be like hide on first 2 pages or something, right?
Well, there can be anything, right? Yeah.
Just to make it clear what it does. And then people can add it to their items as well if they want.
It would only work when they're using this, when this block is running in their interview, right? Or whatever we change it to do.
But that always does. I mean, they're not changing that with the code that we showed.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of don't like this API to begin with.
Period.
Like I
Okay.
don't, like I said, it's like this API of like, hey, here's a magic list in the interview that you can change with these special functions.
Sure. I mean, we can talk about changing the API.
Well, no, you're taking, that's a kind of a tangent. I'm just trying to say, like, I don't know if like making it have our own special configurations that are limited to our stuff is a good, totally good solution to it, to that issue. If we don't need the complexity. So like, if you think through the times people might want to change the menu items right now, they can do it with code, right? It's totally, I guess, imperative code. You run the code when you want to have something different. You have to make sure, I guess we should make sure we can still override this, although I guess
I
you
don't
just
think-
should consider block, so it's
I
more
don't-
dynamic what it does. If you then have this hook, which is keyed to particular items in this dictionary, it goes to be like a mix between declarative and I guess procedural is the right word to use there, but not necessarily in a really clear way. Like it feels like a bit messy. So
I
maybe
think
it's
what
worth,
we have now is messier, but
you're saying like, let's compound it by making it more configurable. And I'm saying maybe we don't
seem
make it
to
more
need
configurable.
to.
We just take out that current configuration.
Yeah, well,
And
we
then
can
this as a configuration.
change how it works, or we can, like, either way we're changing how it works. I thought you just said you don't want to change it. Never mind. I'm okay with either of those, sure. I
Well,
just thought you said you didn't want to do the version where we don't delete.
well, hold on. I mean, I think the reason why you don't know what I'm saying is because you're jumping into answer, but I haven't finished saying what I'm saying yet.
Sure.
Which I understand that's hard to avoid sometimes, but I'm looking at this code and I'm thinking like, I don't necessarily like a bunch of configuration choices that are this messy and nested, right? We're kind of stuck with it because it's the DocAssemble API for changing the menu. So do we want to come up with our own special configuration for it or not? And I would lean to like saying like having little bits of configuration that are in different places is not necessarily great, right? Like, so I'd rather think through if we even need this flexibility. Like it's a very specific niche thing. And we already know there are other reasons throughout the interview's life that people are going to want to be able to add and delete menu items. Like that's a possibility that people are going to have. The way they do that is by redefining the whole list, which will require them potentially overriding this. So like giving them flexibility that lets them do only part of what they want, but in a way that kind of interferes with it. Can we think through if this is useful? There probably is a reason we did this.
The reason was that we didn't want people to edit their answers on the first couple pages.
Well, I mean, we can just show. I mean, there's lots of different ways around that, right? Like there's also an issue here, which is this does not handle what happens if the, it's just for start over, download, and exit, erase, okay.
Oh, it wasn't edited.
This is not
it's
about
starting over.
editing
Yeah.
anything, it's
It
about
was
those three
starting over.
items.
Yeah. Right. Don't know why we don't want to let them exit on the first couple pages, but
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of like the fact that those aren't visible. They do seem just kind of clutter if they don't do anything meaningful.
I mean, the configuration that we're thinking of adding is a by default, nothing happens. And if that configuration key is included, then something happens. So it's not like people have to use it.
Obviously not, but you're saying you're giving them a new thing to learn about that is very specific. Like you said, the configuration option you're envisioning would be
Sure.
hide
I'm
on
just
the
saying
first few screens.
among other considerations, I think it's worth remembering that. That's all. Not arguing against anything that you said.
I wish I could imagine a better API for this than any of these options. Any thoughts, Bryce? Can't tell if you're thinking or just.
Sorry, I'll admit I am. There's the CDC did, or the CDC moratorium did break because of Docker symbols markdown stuff. So I was just changing that quietly in the
Oh,
background.
wait, don't worry about that because that interview is out of date. We should probably just uninstall it.
Should we just uninstall it entirely?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kept it up for a little while because like people had linked to it and it was like, hey, learn about our other stuff. But
That's sort of
been
what I
now
thought.
2.5
Like I figured we
years.
still want
Could
to keep it up for the links.
Could we
And-
replace it with an just replace
We
the whole
could-
interview with an informational page that says this?
That's what
doesn't-
we have essentially, but it's the same. To
It's
do
the
that,
same package, but it just says don't use it anymore, right?
yeah, we have like one
Totally
page
get
that
it.
says don't use it anymore, but Docker symbol breaks because it tried to parse the whole YAML. And there's some other YAML that like it's like a new markdown thing that Jonathan added that doesn't like certain indentations.
Okay. All right. That's annoying.
So I was just gonna make,
I'll
yeah, I
have
was
to
just
test
making
this in a lot of
change.
other packages.
Yeah, I forgot about that. This is why it's hard
Yep.
to update. But regarding this, I mean, I'm sort of. I think I feel like the very specific ID is not the best option here. I agree that it's not great, but it's also such a very specific niche thing. Like the only thing it really is just hiding for 2 pages. And it's only because it's slightly a better UI to not show people to restart on their first page. Like it's really specific and I can't think of a better. I understand the idea of wanting a better API for it, but I can't think of one. So
So the broader need is like setting out when an item should be visible or not visible, I guess.
Yeah. And I don't think it, but I don't think it like, we need a very general way of, a super general way of doing that, because that feels like a whole lot of complexity for things I can't imagine to use, which I guess is fine, and people have, that's what good APIs do, is you can't think of uses for them, but it also seems like a lot of work for hiding something on the 5th page, but not all of the other ones, or stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it wouldn't, but that's, I think the problem is like, I can't think of a way to say like a good rule that's not like interview logic specific. I guess that I guess that it's like disabled or enabled, right? Like if you could control that dynamically, that might be a better API.
Yeah, that's fair. That is, I get that is sort of the way of thinking about it.
And then we would need some way to run code that sets that to disabled on a certain screen. I think that would be a much better API. It's a bit more complicated, but it could be right here in the same block, because this runs on every screen. Set it to enabled on a certain screen and disabled on another screen on a certain condition. We put the logic here to have be enabled or not.
That would make sense too.
And then the reason to keep it in this spot, rather than just not adding it to the list at all,
Is it we don't
that's
want to
justified,
interfere with
really.
someone else's stuff?
I guess just to make it easier to read the code. Well, now that we're making it a list people can modify.
And reading the code does matter.
Yeah. All right, let's just make sure. Can we? I'm assuming DocAssemble just doesn't care about the extra keys, but maybe we should double check that. It's true. Yeah. It's directly getting the URL and label. Doesn't seem to do anything funky with like turning it into a tuple or a list. That would break by us adding custom keys. All right, I'm just thinking through this. I can't tell if anyone's
We would also want an ID for when we go through the loop and we're like, if this is the first page and the ID of this item is, restart or whatever, then set its hidden value to true, right? Like we
No,
need a way to identify.
no, we wouldn't. That would be an option, but I'm proposing a different API, which would be each item says whether it's visible or not visible.
But if you're going to set it to visible or not visible, you need a way to identify the item so that you know if it's the one you want to set to visible or not visible.
I don't know that we would.
Like, how would we identify them otherwise and set them to visible or not visible based on the page?
So the question, I guess, is like how.
Otherwise, it's hidden or not hidden forever.
No, because we're already running a reconsider block here, which defines the items. So if we move the logic that says whether it's there or not to being here, when we add it, we're setting it to be visible or invisible.
So that's where the logic for the page would go. Got it.
Yeah. Now I'm not sure if that's great because I don't know like how DocAssemble decides which reconsider block to run last. I assume it just runs top to bottom like it does normally.
You mean bottom to top?
We had trouble. Well, top to bottom is for mandatory, so I don't know.
Reconsiders. I think.
Bottom to top.
Like the latest one overrides the lowest in the file overrides the earliest. So that's bottom to
Yeah.
top, I think.
Yeah,
Just mandatory blocks.
mandatory and initial might run top to bottom too, but yeah, I think reconsider is slightly different.
Okay, if we renamed this to be default items and we have logic that defines default items and reconsiders those are independent of what the author modifies. The author defines the menu items to be no. This, okay, I just realized this means we don't want it to be default items and then add to default items, do we? We want to have something like another new variable that's named, oh, it already is like AL menu item, sorry.
AL menu items.
We already have that, never mind. We don't have to redefine that. Okay. So it's just the AL menu items gets defined to be the default plus our custom list. Yeah, so that's easy enough. If that runs on every screen. So if we also reconsider the default items in a dynamic way, that's totally fine to happen without worrying about overriding it. Yeah, okay, so never mind. I was worried about this creating some kind of loop where they're trying to race to see who wins, but I don't think I have to worry about that actually. Okay. I like what I kind of like about this API is you don't really have to use this code anymore. You could use DocAssemble's variable block, which reads just like YAML. So it's a lot easier to read.
Okay.
And you see, I guess if you have a reconsider on it and you can have the true or false be defined by a line of code that runs, so it's more declarative. Yeah. You write your own Python code to say when it's visible and when it's not, and it can be right in place. And you don't have to worry about adding or not adding it to the list. The list is static. It's just whether it's visible or not that's dynamic. Are there more? I started making a bulleted list. Is this really a list, or is it just this one thing?
I think it's
Not really.
just the one thing.
Yeah, it's just
Oh,
complicated.
We'll make it a list then. Actually, I think it's important that it's not hidden rather than not being visible. Okay, I think I feel better about this API.
It seems reasonable to me. So maybe get rid of the second, the third paragraph.
You say it again, get rid of what?
The second and third paragraphs. Because we won't have that attribute that's named in the, I mean, third and fourth paragraphs. Because we're not gonna have the hidden,
We would. This is I
Attribute.
just described. We would be adding a hidden attribute.
oh, I thought you said that just don't add the hidden attribute, hidden attribute on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph. The code that defined menu items would evaluate blah blah and only add the not hidden items to the menu items.
Right. Menu items is DocAssemble's internal list.
Oh, I see, got it.
Yeah. So
I thought you meant to the default menu items, got it. Because that's another alternative, is to only add non-hidden items to your menu, but then I guess it's harder to
it makes it harder to manage. Right?
evaluate because
you can
can't
have some
that data
extra
block.
Yeah. I mean, it means like
Can't have that
basically
YAML block. Okay.
you can't have the YAML block. Yes, that's true. But also, if you want to change the state based on something that happens in the interview,
Mhm.
it's no longer a setting you can toggle. You have to redefine the whole list. So you have to have every place you change the status of any item, you would need to have a whole tree that defines the full list.
Okay.
So you would need to think through the logic every place you touch one of the items for the whole interview.
Okay.
You'd have to have
I
a
was
mental
just trying
model
to think of
as the
a
author of
way-
the whole interview's logic.
Yeah.
Every time you change one menu item's state.
I was just trying to think. Then I'll turn the way than having.
I like this API to help improve the navigation items too. I think it could be used there in a similar way
Okay.
to make it easier to read. Okay. Anything else I should add here? Because I do want it to be clear. And I guess we're over time, but. Yeah, thanks for thinking about this all last week. And thanks for some good ideas of how to improve the current code.
All right.
Feel pretty good about the solution that we've outlined here.
Okay. I think the delete items was whatever.
The delete items.
Never mind. We don't have
mean
time
this
for it.
No, you mean
Yeah, I mean assembly line managing the delete items bit.
add that to the notes?
Yeah, maybe we can discuss it another time. I don't know if it's necessary anyway. I'm just saying, I was thinking maybe that's a part that maybe we could take out of the hands of the user, where we could handle.
You mean
that
the
way.
reconsider? Okay, you said delete, but you meant the reconsider, I guess, right?
No, I meant the delete. I
Deleting
meant
the
the
tab.
delete. The delete at the bottom, so scroll up. Right, the delete at the bottom of the block that defines AL menu items. Delete AL menu items temp. I was thinking we might be able to take care of that in the block ourselves, as opposed to making the developer do it, as you can see
Yeah,
on
I'm not
the
sure
second
we-
code block.
right. I don't know if we can, because I think it might cause an infinite loop.
Okay,
I didn't say
Alright.
that earlier, but now that I'm looking at it, I think that would happen. But also by letting the author control it, we give them more responsibility, obviously. But it's 2 lines. I think it's not too bad.
okay.
But they can, if they don't like our way of doing the AL menu items at all, they replace it there.
Mhm.
Yeah, if they want to totally override our list. So otherwise, I'm worried that whatever we do would stop them from doing what they wanted, to override it in a way that would be even harder for us to mitigate, because we're coupling it more tightly to our stuff. I could be wrong, but okay.
I think there's not time to think about that right now.
I mean, I think we discussed it, but
Okay,
we can certainly revisit it. Okay. So we did this. We definitely didn't get to any of these really vague things. So actually, that's not bad. We pretty much closed this. Okay, so I guess we'll talk later this week. Anything else that seems urgent that we should touch on before we sign off?
No,
Okay, sorry we went over it. I'm
wait,
just realizing
did
maybe I should.
Bryce, did you have something?
I said no.
Okay. Hey, do you need a hand with any of the, is it just that one interview that has the problems that you caught?
No, they're fixed. It was also the 209A, which I realized I had already patched that issue and it just wasn't updated, so I just.
You just had to install.
I just put the newest version on and it looks like they're all good now, so
Okay,
at least
Just
the
that.
list is all good, so.
and it sounds like it was a parsing issue, so that's pretty safe, actually. That's
Yes, yeah, it should find all of the parsing issues in the interview, even if in the moratorium case, it was never going to run, so. It'll catch them if they're there and we won't have to worry about it if there's something silently that pops up later for folks.
Okay. All right. I guess maybe we should think about, yeah, take a look at the security stuff. Let me know what your thoughts are. We should think about following my suggestions.
Would you mind? Yeah, I was gonna say,
I put it on
would you
team.
mind sending you posted the
Yeah,
whole
on
list
the
of-
back end.
Oh, sorry. Well, no, I was gonna say I'll first look at the
Oh,
log
the
of-
OSSF thing, Open SSF. Is that what
Yes, yeah, I was also gonna say if
Yeah.
you could post that, just the output of what you had there, because I'm curious. on,
Oh, the
like, what-
output. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was trying to figure out how to like get a summary.
It's linked in the article, right?
No, not yet. I was
Oh.
just trying to evaluate external resources, and that one looked good. Let me
I
see.
see, got it.
I've got to hop off.
It doesn't-
But
It's just formatted for the console. I can't.
Right.
There's not like a summary. I don't know why. There's no like.
I mean, just even
report.
just like a text output is good enough. I was just curious without having to set it up myself and run it.
Yeah.
What scores it we give and like examples of explanations and stuff. It seems fine. But I'm also curious about that. But for sure, I'll look at the blog
Okay.
post of it and try and give some feedback there.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it copied better than I thought it would, at least on my desktop.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's not too bad. It's a bit scrolly or horizontal scroll, but it's not bad.
Yeah. Okay,